What happens when a truck has to cross one of the hottest places on Earth, where the temperature can climb above 55 degrees Celsius? Every kilometer puts the truck's engine, tires, fuel, and cooling system under extreme stress. But one trucker is about to drive deep into the Sahara, carrying a load that cannot simply be left behind. What happens inside the truck during the hottest hours, and how does its machinery survive? Stay with us, and subscribe for more real engineering stories. As the sun rises, the temperature begins attacking the truck's most critical system, the engine. Diesel engines already generate enormous heat during combustion, and Sahara temperatures leave much less room for cooling. The radiator must continuously remove heat while the cooling fan forces air through its fins. Inside, coolant carries heat away from the engine and toward the radiator. If this balance fails, engine temperature can rise rapidly. In the desert, keeping the engine cool isn't just about performance, it's essential for completing the journey. As the desert heats up, the tires face a different kind of danger. Extreme ambient temperatures combine with friction from the road, causing tire temperatures and internal pressure to rise. A heavy truck carrying cargo places enormous weight on every wheel. That is why tire condition and pressure are critical before entering the hottest part of the route. The driver must constantly respect the limits of the tires, because in the Sahara, a small mechanical problem can become a major problem when the nearest help is hundreds of kilometers away. As the truck travels deeper into the Sahara, tire temperature becomes increasingly important. Heat from the road and friction during continuous driving can raise the temperature of the air inside the tires, causing pressure to increase. At the same time, the heavy cargo keeps enormous loads on the wheels. The driver therefore has to respect the truck's tire limits and driving conditions. In a place this remote, preventing a tire problem before it happens can be far more important than dealing with one after it occurs. Fuel is another critical factor during a long journey through extreme desert heat. As the truck sits and moves under intense sunlight, the fuel system itself operates in a much hotter environment than normal. The engine still needs a steady supply of diesel, while filters, pumps, lines, and the fuel tank must continue working reliably. For a truck traveling hundreds of kilometers from the nearest major settlement, fuel management becomes part of survival. There is little room for waste, unexpected delays, or mechanical problems. Before diesel reaches the engine, it must pass through carefully designed filtration. In the Sahara, dust is everywhere, and contamination in the fuel can damage precision components inside a modern diesel injection system. The fuel filter removes unwanted particles and, in many systems, helps separate water from the fuel. This small component has a critical job, protecting pumps and injectors that operate under extremely high pressure. For a truck far from a workshop, keeping the fuel clean can make the difference between continuing the journey and stopping in the desert. Fuel is not the only thing that needs protection. A diesel engine also needs a huge amount of clean air for combustion, and the Sahara can fill that air with fine dust and sand particles. The truck's air filtration system must capture these contaminants before they reach the engine. A clogged filter can restrict airflow and reduce performance, while poor filtration can allow abrasive particles into sensitive engine components. Far from civilization, this simple-looking system becomes another essential defense between the engine and the desert. Inside the engine, clean air is only the beginning. A modern heavy-duty diesel uses a turbocharger to push more air into the combustion system, helping the engine produce strong power under heavy load. Exhaust gases spin a turbine, which is connected to a compressor on the intake side. As the compressor rotates, it forces more air toward the engine. In the Sahara, this system must keep working despite extreme heat, dust, and continuous load, because the truck cannot afford to lose power on a long desert climb. Outside, the Sahara may feel almost unbearable, but the trucker still has to work inside the cabin for hours. The cabin's air conditioning system becomes more than a comfort feature, it helps create a workable environment for the driver. Hot outside air passes through the HVAC system, while the compressor, condenser, evaporator, blower, and filters work together to remove heat and circulate cooler air. But the system itself is operating under extreme conditions. If cooling performance drops, the driver faces the heat while still needing to remain focused on the road. Cooling the cabin is only half the challenge. The heat removed from inside must be released back into the already scorching desert air. The air conditioning condenser, usually positioned where it can receive strong airflow, rejects this heat as the refrigerant changes state through the system. Meanwhile, the blower keeps conditioned air circulating inside the cabin. Every component has to work continuously while the truck moves through dust, heat, and vibration. For the driver, this invisible cycle is what makes hours behind the wheel possible in the middle of the Sahara. By midday, the Sahara reaches its harshest conditions. The truck has already been running for hours, and every major system is now working under sustained heat and load. The engine must maintain power, the cooling system must reject heat, and the air intake must continue supplying clean air despite the dusty environment. At the same time, the truck is carrying a heavy cargo across an isolated route. This is when reliability matters most. There is no shade, no easy roadside repair, and often no immediate help nearby. Keeping the engine running is only part of the challenge. That power still has to reach the wheels while the truck carries a massive load across difficult terrain. The transmission controls how engine torque is delivered at different speeds, allowing the truck to move efficiently from slower sections to faster stretches of road. Behind it, the drive shaft and axles transfer that power toward the wheels. In the Sahara heat, these components face continuous mechanical stress, making proper lubrication and temperature control essential for a long, demanding journey. The Sahara road is rarely perfectly smooth. Beneath the heavy cargo, every bump sends forces through the truck's suspension and frame. The suspension must absorb much of this movement while keeping the tires in contact with the ground. Springs, dampers, axles, and suspension links work together as the truck crosses uneven sand, rocks, and rough pavement. At high temperatures and heavy loads, these components experience continuous stress. For the driver, a properly functioning suspension is not just about comfort, it helps maintain control and keeps the truck moving safely across difficult terrain. Eventually, even a powerful truck can encounter soft sand. When the tires sink deeper, rolling resistance increases and the engine has to work harder to keep the vehicle moving. The driver may need to reduce speed and choose a firmer path instead of simply adding more power. Tire grip, weight distribution, and careful throttle control become critical. In the Sahara, driving skill is closely connected to mechanical sympathy. The goal is not to fight the desert with brute force, but to keep the truck moving without overwhelming its drivetrain or tires. For the trucker, the desert creates a danger that has nothing to do with the engine: dehydration. At extreme temperatures, the body can lose water quickly through sweating and breathing, especially during long hours behind the wheel. That makes regular hydration essential throughout the journey. Water and other supplies must be planned before entering remote sections of the Sahara, because reliable services may be hundreds of kilometers apart. While the truck's cooling systems protect its machinery, the driver must protect the most important system of all: his own ability to stay alert and continue driving safely. As the truck moves farther from populated areas, the landscape becomes almost completely empty. There may be no buildings, fuel stations, or repair shops for long stretches of the route. Navigation, communication, and careful planning therefore become essential parts of the journey. The trucker cannot simply stop whenever something goes wrong. Every kilometer is covered with the knowledge that the next reliable service point may still be far away. In this environment, preparation is not an extra advantage, it is what allows a long-distance journey to continue. Every time the truck slows down, enormous kinetic energy has to be controlled by the braking system. On a heavily loaded vehicle, that energy can turn into intense heat at the brakes. In the Sahara, high ambient temperatures make heat management even more important. Brake discs or drums, friction materials, calipers, and cooling airflow must work together reliably. Long descents or repeated braking can increase temperatures quickly, so the driver must manage speed carefully rather than relying on the brakes continuously. In the desert, stopping safely begins long before the brake pedal is pressed. Extreme heat also changes how the truck's tires behave. As tire temperature rises, the air inside expands and pressure increases. For a heavily loaded truck traveling long distances, maintaining the correct tire pressure is essential for stability, traction, and tire life. Too much or too little pressure can affect how the tire contacts the road and manages heat. That is why experienced drivers monitor tire condition throughout the journey. In the Sahara, a tire is not simply a piece of rubber, it is a critical part of the truck's connection with the road. As afternoon slowly turns toward evening, the landscape begins to change, but the truck does not immediately escape the heat. The ground has absorbed enormous amounts of solar energy throughout the day and continues releasing that heat back into the surrounding air. Inside the truck, the engine and other mechanical systems are still carrying residual heat from hours of operation. The driver watches the road as the harsh sunlight becomes lower on the horizon. After a full day in the Sahara, even the approach of sunset offers only a gradual relief from the extreme conditions. When darkness finally reaches the Sahara, the temperature begins to fall, but the journey may continue. The truck's headlights now become the driver's main visual reference, illuminating only a small section of the road ahead. Navigation becomes more important as familiar desert landmarks disappear into darkness. Inside the cabin, the engine instruments and road ahead remain the driver's focus. After hours of extreme heat, the cooler night air can reduce some thermal stress on the truck. But the desert is still vast, remote, and unforgiving, and there are many kilometers left to travel. After hours of extreme daytime heat, the cooler night air begins to change the truck's operating environment. The engine is still producing heat, but the surrounding air is now far less severe than it was under the afternoon sun. The cooling system continues circulating coolant through the engine and radiator, carrying heat away from critical components. Meanwhile, the truck keeps moving through the darkness, with its headlights cutting across the empty road. For the machine, the night offers some relief, but the journey is still demanding, and every system must continue working reliably. Night driving brings a different challenge, maintaining concentration after a long day in extreme conditions. The desert road can appear repetitive, with darkness stretching far beyond the headlights. The trucker must remain attentive to the road, vehicle instruments, navigation, and changing terrain. Inside the cabin, controlled lighting helps preserve visibility without overwhelming the driver's view of the road. Meanwhile, the truck continues carrying its heavy load through the darkness. In a remote environment like the Sahara, staying focused is just as important as keeping the machinery running. Hours have passed since sunset, and the truck is still moving through the desert. The darkness is slowly giving way to the first signs of dawn. After the intense heat of the previous day, the cooler air has changed the conditions around the truck. But the journey is not finished. The driver continues watching the road while the engine, tires, suspension, and cooling system keep working together. Ahead lies another day in the Sahara, and soon the rising sun will begin heating the desert once again. As the sun rises higher, the desert begins its daily transformation. Cold night air gives way to rapidly increasing temperatures, and the sand and road surface start absorbing solar energy again. The truck has survived one cycle of extreme conditions, but the next is already beginning. The driver checks the road ahead and continues toward the next destination. Every kilometer now carries the memory of the previous day's heat, dust, and mechanical stress. In the Sahara, the journey is not simply about reaching the destination. It is about managing the environment every hour. For a truck crossing the Sahara, fuel planning can be just as important as navigation. A heavy diesel truck consumes fuel continuously, while long distances between service stations leave little room for poor planning. Load weight, road conditions, speed, wind, and terrain can all change fuel consumption. The driver therefore needs to know how far the truck can realistically travel before the next reliable fuel stop. In a remote desert, running low on fuel is more than an inconvenience, it can turn a routine journey into a serious logistical problem. After covering a long distance through the desert, the truck finally reaches a fuel stop. Here, the driver can replenish the diesel supply and briefly inspect the vehicle before continuing. A fuel stop in the Sahara is more than simply filling a tank. It is an opportunity to check tires, engine fluids, cooling components, and the overall condition of the truck. Every inspection matters because the next stretch of road may lead far away from any workshop or service facility. Once the tank is secured and the truck is ready, the journey begins again. But the Sahara can change without warning. A sudden dust storm can reduce visibility, cover the road with blowing sand, and make navigation much more difficult. For a trucker, the priority is no longer speed, it is control. The driver must reduce speed and carefully judge the road and surrounding conditions. Fine dust can also enter vulnerable parts of a vehicle if protection is inadequate. In the middle of an enormous desert, a few minutes of changing weather can transform an open highway into a completely different driving environment. Minutes later, the wind begins to weaken and the dust slowly settles back onto the desert. Visibility improves, revealing the road once again. The trucker does not simply accelerate immediately. He first confirms that the road surface is clear and that the truck is operating normally. Dust can settle around the vehicle, covering mirrors, lights, and exposed surfaces. After a quick visual check, the journey continues. The storm has passed, but the Sahara has once again demonstrated how quickly conditions can change in a place where there is little infrastructure to provide assistance. After hours of heat, darkness, dust, and endless road, the journey is finally approaching its destination. The truck has crossed one of the harshest environments on Earth while its engine, tires, cooling system, and driver work together continuously. But reaching the end is not simply about distance. It is the result of preparation, mechanical reliability, careful driving, and respect for the desert. As the truck moves toward the final stretch of road, the enormous Sahara slowly falls behind. For this driver, another extreme day on the road is finally coming to an end. The final kilometers are behind him now. After an exhausting journey through extreme heat, darkness, dust, and remote roads, the truck finally reaches its destination. The engine slows, the wheels stop, and the long desert journey comes to an end. What looks like an ordinary truck arriving at a destination is actually the result of thousands of small decisions: fuel planning, vehicle checks, speed management, navigation, and constant attention. In the Sahara, surviving the journey is not about one dramatic moment. It is about doing everything correctly, kilometer after kilometer. A journey through the Sahara at extreme temperatures is a reminder of what machines, and the people operating them, can endure. From engine cooling to fuel management, every system has a role in keeping the truck moving. If you enjoyed seeing what really happens behind the wheel of a truck crossing one of the world's harshest environments, make sure to subscribe for more cinematic documentaries exploring extraordinary machines, places, and journeys around the world.